In a small city surrounded by factories and fading playgrounds lived a 17-year-old girl named Mira. She wasn't extraordinary in the way people often notice. She wasn't top of her class, not the captain of any team, not known for brilliance or beauty. But Mira carried something inside her that most overlooked, a quiet longing to change her life. Each day followed the same pattern. She'd wake up late, rush through school, come home exhausted, and promise herself she'd start something new tomorrow. Sometimes she'd make to-do lists. Other times she'd stay up late watching videos about productivity and success. But the lists remained untouched. The dreams stayed dreams. And every evening, a quiet voice inside whispered, "Maybe you're just not the type who succeeds." That voice grew louder after she failed her math exam. Her teacher shook her head. Her parents were disappointed, though they tried not to show it. Her friends said things like, "You're just not a math person," and she began to believe it. One afternoon, while waiting for the bus, she scrolled past a video titled, "The 1% Rule, How Small Habits Create Massive Change." She nearly skipped it. But something about the phrase 1% rule caught her attention. She clicked. The speaker didn't talk about hustle or motivation. Instead, he spoke about brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, about writing one sentence a day, about doing one push-up instead of 20. Tiny things, ridiculously small, but consistent. Mira watched in silence, and for the first time she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt curious. That night she set a tiny goal. Write one sentence in her notebook. Not a page, not a paragraph, just one. The next morning, Mira woke up as usual, groggy, unmotivated, already overwhelmed by the thought of another day. But then she remembered the notebook on her desk, the one with just one sentence written the night before. She read it. "I want to stop giving up on myself." It wasn't poetic. It wasn't even grammatically perfect. But it was real. Hers. She picked up her pen and added another sentence. "Even if it's slow, I want to move forward." That was it. 2 sentences in total, less than a minute of effort. But something about it made her feel lighter. That day at school, nothing dramatic happened. Her math teacher still looked tired, the lunch line was still long, and her friends still talked about things she didn't care much about. But Mira carried a small secret in her heart. She had shown up for herself, even in the smallest way. The next day, she wrote a third sentence, then a fourth. One day she wrote 2, then a full paragraph, but she never forced it. Her only rule, do a little, consistently. She started applying the same idea to other parts of her life. Instead of vowing to study for 2 hours, she reviewed one flashcard. Instead of promising to exercise daily, she did 10 jumping jacks. Instead of deleting every social media app, she simply turned off notifications for one of them. And slowly something began to shift, not in the world, but in her. She started walking with a bit more energy. Her teachers noticed she raised her hand more often. Her friends said she seemed more focused, more sure of herself. But what they didn't see, what no one saw, were the tiny wins stacking quietly in the background. Weeks passed. Mira's notebook was no longer a place for one-sentence thoughts. It had become a quiet record of her return to herself. Each page held pieces of her struggle, her small wins, her moments of doubt, and her growing clarity. But the most important thing, she had kept going. She hadn't missed a day, even on nights when she was tired, even on days when she felt like a failure. The ritual had become hers, simple, private, and powerful. One afternoon, while reviewing her old test papers, she noticed something. Her math scores had improved. Not drastically, but enough to make her blink twice. Enough to make her believe change was real. She didn't feel like a different person. She felt like a more honest one. Like the version of herself she had been trying to reach for years was finally coming into view. And maybe you felt that distance too, between who you are and who you want to be. Maybe big goals have always felt too far, too heavy, too overwhelming. But what if the way forward isn't through intensity? What if it's through intention? That's what we believe here. This channel isn't about perfection or pressure. It's about tiny shifts, stories that help you believe again in slow, steady, soul-rooted growth. So if Mira's story has sparked something in you, take a small step right now. Subscribe, not because you have it all figured out, but because maybe you're ready to stop giving up on yourself too. Mira's mornings began to look different. She no longer snoozed her alarm 5 times. She no longer skipped breakfast or left assignments half done. She still had days where things didn't go as planned, but the difference was, she didn't fall apart when they didn't. Her small habits had built something inside her, resilience, and that resilience was showing up everywhere. She started helping a classmate who always struggled with concentration, not with lectures, just with small reminders. Try reading this one paragraph, she'd say. Don't worry about the whole chapter yet. She wasn't trying to be a role model, she was just passing on what had worked for her. Tiny steps, honest efforts, quiet persistence. Her parents noticed too. One evening, her mother looked at her and said, "You seem more settled lately, more peaceful." Mira smiled. She hadn't done anything dramatic. She hadn't had a breakthrough moment, but she had shown up for herself, every day, bit by bit. And now, she was beginning to see what those bits had built. She was still Mira, still unsure at times, still learning, but she no longer waited for motivation to strike like lightning. She created movement through action. She had learned the most powerful truth of all. You don't have to do everything at once. You just have to start. One quiet evening, Mira sat on her rooftop as the city lights began to flicker on one by one. She had her notebook open on her lap, pages filled with evidence of her slow transformation. Not just in words, but in who she was becoming. She thought back to that girl who could barely finish a task, who constantly felt like she was falling behind. That girl still lived inside her, but now she had company, a calmer voice that said, "We're getting there, one step at a time." She flipped back through the pages, short entries, unfinished thoughts, doodles in the margins. None of it was perfect, but it was hers. It was progress. A soft breeze passed over her, and she smiled. Success, she realized, wasn't some distant finish line waiting at the end of a sprint. It was the quiet confidence that comes from keeping promises to yourself, even the small ones. Her classmates were beginning to notice too. "You've changed," one girl said. "You seem more focused, like you know where you're going." Mira didn't have a grand answer. She simply said, "I just started small." And in those 3 words lay the blueprint for everything that had followed. There was no secret, no shortcut, just the power of starting, the courage to continue, and the patience to believe that tiny steps, taken consistently, can lead you to places you never imagined you'd reach. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the rooftops as Mira closed her notebook and looked up at the evening sky. It was the same sky she'd stared at months ago, filled with doubt and overwhelm. But tonight, it didn't feel so heavy. It felt like space, room to grow, to try, to become. She had not transformed overnight. There had been no moment of sudden brilliance, no cinematic breakthrough, just small, deliberate steps, taken quietly, consistently. A few minutes of effort, a few words on a page, a few seconds of belief, and those few seconds had made all the difference. Her story wasn't about massive change. It was about direction, about the decision to move, even if slowly, about trusting that even the tiniest act, done with intention, carries weight. And now, she didn't fear falling behind. She had learned that the ones who reach the finish line aren't always the ones who rush. Sometimes they're the ones who walk, steadily, faithfully, patiently. Because success isn't about being fast, it's about not stopping. So before this story ends, here's a quiet question for you. If you took one tiny step today, just one, where might it quietly lead you tomorrow?